Welcome to the Visionary Spotlight. I'm Emily Hamel-Shaver, a brand message consultant and copywriter, the owner of Lumos Communications. We are talking AI today, which means I get to introduce you to one of my favorite people in the whole entire world. Jocelyn Burnham is one of the UK's leading AI consultants, trainers, and speakers, specializing in developing AI literacy and innovation through creativity and playfulness. Jocelyn works widely with the creative and cultural sectors, with a client list including Tate, Arts Council England, and Bloomberg Philanthropies. She also speaks frequently at conferences and events about AI and its cross-sector applications. And it was just announced that a collaborative AI-driven project created by Jocelyn with the Arts Marketing Association was just awarded $250,000 in development funding from the UK's National Lottery Heritage Fund. And that's in pounds, not dollars. Jocelyn, I have known you for many years, and so I know that wherever you go, you make good things happen and you make things better. So thank you for being here today. Welcome.
That is incredibly kind, and thank you for having me, and also right back at you.
Oh, that is incredibly kind also. So, despite you being this voice on AI literacy, you and I haven't actually talked very much about it, and that's in part because I am fairly avoidant about AI. I use it in small ways, and it is helpful. When I use it, I'm like, oh, I like this. But it's been hard for me to embrace. And so in this conversation, I'm gonna be vulnerable and I'm gonna show some of my stuck thinking around it because it is a growth area for me and I want to grow. And I know that if I'm feeling this way, other people are too. So thank you in advance for coaching us.
You're very welcome. And honestly, it's a feeling that is really common. Even yesterday, the government here put out a report where they spoke to 5,000 people about their feelings on AI. And the first words were always things like anxiety, overwhelm, just stuck, robots, fear. So this is very much what everyone is feeling right now.
Okay, so we are not alone, and I know you see the robots as neutral. You have this perspective on AI as a whole, not good, not bad, neutral. And maybe there's lots of nuance to that. So I'd like to hear more about that perspective to start with.
Sure, sure. So I do try to kind of position my work, my workshops and all of this from more of a neutral perspective. And what I mean by that is I kind of found myself a little bit tired of the amount of AI kind of workshops and AI kind of resources that were so overwhelmingly kind of positive and full of, you're going to supercharge your results, you're going to do all of this. And it felt very much like you were being sold a car in a bad way. No offense to car salespeople out there, but more in the stereotypical hard sell. And that really rubbed me up the wrong way. It still sort of does. And it feels so unnecessary as well. I think if something improves our work and our lives, it's self-evident that it's useful. You don't need to persuade people. I think all you really need to do is persuade people to be experimental, to be critical, and then also to bring their sort of full human selves into their work, and then the results will speak for themselves. So I really don't see it as my place to try and sell people on anything other than that they should have confidence to be part of these conversations and to use these tools in ways that they want to use them rather than how they've been told that they should use them. So that's kind of what I'm sort of trying to push a bit.
Yeah.
But these tools and this tech is complicated, and I think we need to be very open and honest about the good and the bad and the perspectives that we might not have considered when we're looking at how these tools are applied. Because I have no idea if it'll help someone's job. I don't know what their job involves. How can I possibly say that? But yeah, I get excited from hearing those different perspectives in my own work.
Yeah. Oh, it's comforting to hear because I do think there was such a crazy upsurge in, I work in marketing. You have a deep expertise in marketing in your background. And so we like are tuned in to how these workshops are positioned, like increase your impact. This is the only way. Don't be left behind. This is the future. Innovate or die. And it's like, it's really stressful and I think it automatically like creates this feeling of like a lack which a lack in like a you have to go all in or you aren't going to keep pace. Um, and so I appreciate you sharing that about like we get to think of what our own experience is in this. How maybe can it help us? How can we be critical of this? And that's one of the first areas that I really want to dig into is like, um, for me, I feel critical of AI because I want less tech, less screen time in my life overall, despite knowing that and proving to myself that AI can also like expand time for me. It can help me with my work. It like, and so far above and beyond that in ways I don't even understand, it can make space for the things that are important to
Mm.
me. So I don't want to be left behind, but I don't want to stare at a screen because I already do that all day and it already feels like life is already at risk of being overrun by tech. So like I'm not asking you to solve all of the problems of the modern world, but how can we like talk about like starting to reconcile this tension?
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating question. And I completely am so sympathetic to that. I'm the same way. I hate staring at screens. I try and leave my phone in a drawer whenever I can. I'm not on TikTok. I get very overwhelmed by the amount of screen proliferation. And yeah, it does kind of frighten me. So I definitely do think that there is space to have a relationship with technology which suits you. And one of the reasons why I integrate AI into certain parts of my life is for exactly that reason. It's to use screens less. It's to be able to kind of get away from it and create workflows where I can go and do something else while my little agentic AI researches, how to get my Christmas tree picked up by the local council. That's what I was having it do today. So it's all this kind of stuff. So that's going to really date this, but it's all it's all that kind of stuff where I want to get away from being reliant on screen to screen,
Yeah.
and to do that, I need to kind of elbow my personality into the tools that I use, because a lot of the time, these tools are created by companies which they have a work culture, they have maybe a normalization of the idea that you're using tech all the time. So within their advertising, within their suggestions, they're going to be thinking, okay, so you're going from this screen to this screen to this screen, and that to them is just normal and culturally part of their working style. So to be able to get away from that, you need to kind of really stand up for what you want and think a bit creatively and really insert your own values into this in a way which might feel a bit jagged at first. But I
Mm.
really do find that AI helps me do that, whether it's coding a solution to something which saves me a little bit of time, using Claude, for example, to make a Chrome extension or something, or, summarizing a big document or writing a letter to, complain to my, yeah, my local government thing about something they've done. All this stuff which I would normally hate to do, I can then speed up that way. So I think a good way of approaching that issue is to just feel that you really have a voice in this conversation and that these are your tools to use for the life that you want to live, not a tool you need to learn perfectly, or you're going to be left behind and your life as you know it will be over and you'll be overrun by robots.
Yeah. So that tension actually serves because I need a little tension to get my values and my personality in there in the way that's right for my life. And it didn't even occur to me, honestly, that like the companies creating these tools have an agenda also. It's like, oh dear, here's where I'm at with AI. That didn't occur to me. And so
Well, it's also not their fault. They're creating this stuff based on, a few markers. They test them against how good it is with solving math
yeah,
problems and a couple of
yeah.
things like this. That's how they're using those criteria to judge and rank and assess those tools. They don't really have any idea what, the average person or someone outside of their country or someone in a different work situation, what they would use that tool for. That's not something which they've particularly tested for. That's not something that they've built into their planning of it. Not in a malicious way, but just because there's so much human diversity out there that that's impossible. So really, to be able to shape it in a way that fits your values, you have to be quite sharp about that and go, no, I will use it for this, I won't for this, and I'm not going to be quite passive and just do exactly what the flashy commercial told me to do, because I think if we're going to use AI, we should become more human, not more like robots ourselves. And sometimes that means bringing ourselves into those decisions about what kind of work we use with it for.
Yeah. Um, I have two questions that sort of like piggyback on this, and um, I think I want to talk first about this like mindset that you bring to AI, and I think I first want to acknowledge like everything AI is a skill. Like using AI is a skill, just like conflict resolution is a skill that humans learn ideally, or some humans learn how to drive a car. You don't have to learn that, but I did learn that. So it's like it's a skill we can all learn. But um, there you have this approach to building AI literacy that you call playful creativity. So can we talk a little bit more about that and like what that means?
Yeah, of course, of course. Um, so I really find the analogy of the internet is really helpful when learning about AI. If you were learning about the internet in the 90s, how would you do it? Would you learn about, how the code of it works, the cables that go underwater? Would you learn how, what element of it would be now I've learned about the internet? And really what you're learning about is, how to use it in a way which you find enjoyable, which you find useful. And then you're kind of exploring that yourself. You're making new discoveries and you're gradually increasing your sphere of knowledge and your sphere of ability on this platform. So I think that analogy is quite helpful with AI. There's no one way to learn about AI and now you know it. It's like the internet. You could know everything there was to know about it in the mid 90s. You could be great at Ask Jeeves, and really know Ask Jeeves well, know the perfect prompt for Ask Jeeves. But 5 years down the road, is that going to help you much? It might have got you started, but this is a marathon. This is something which is going to be with us the rest of our lives. So I would see it with the same mindset that you would in the 90s when thinking about the internet. This is something where we can have conversations, we can learn cool stuff, we can do things with it, but let's also kind of mentally pack our bags that this is going to be a long journey and it's going to be one that's, we're always going to be refreshing our knowledge about it. So within that, I often say that, the best way to learn is not to think about what's most important or what's most efficient, but think about what's most interesting. Think about what could keep your attention the longest and what you really want to do with it. Because when you're exploring AI, again, like with the internet, it's the stuff that keeps your attention is going to end up being the stuff where you actually learn. It's going to be the way you make the experiments, make the connections, have conversations about weird things you've made or discovered. That's the process that can often lead to some great learning. So within that, yeah, I definitely encourage playfulness and creativity as a way to, first of all, kind of combat that fear and anxiety and overwhelm, but then also to enjoy the process because what's the point of learning about anything unless it's enjoyable and unless it gives us something that we want to do? And the sooner we can get to that point where we're actively enjoying something, then you don't need to worry about learning it because you're going to be doing it automatically. So that's kind of where I want people to get to, and that's why I implement it in my own work.
That example, the analogy of the internet is for me perfect because I was a young teenager and so self-involved. Like the internet only existed to me as a tool to like play The Sims, use AIM to talk to my friends, and then write, long posts on Open Diary about my feelings. So it's like I was learning the internet through only what was of interest to me. And so it was inherent in that. So
Yeah,
I love it's like great, just bring it forward then. What's interesting to me?
to me that makes the most sense. I mean, if you were looking back then and you were thinking, imagine yourself in the 90s when you were using, AOL and all this, would you be thinking, oh, I've got to learn this because in 20 years it's going to be my career? Like, how am I going to do that?
Right,
Like that, we know now that wouldn't make any sense asking that
right.
question then. So
Mhm.
my assumption, and I could be wrong, but my assumption is it's the same situation now. Asking that doesn't make any sense. What does make sense is, how can you actually use it? It's a bit like that saying about your vegetables, the healthiest vegetable is the one you'll actually eat. I think the most useful AI tool for you is the one you'll actually use because it's the one you're going to be learning from. and that then gets you started on the journey.
Yeah. So let's talk about some examples because you already have like this incredible spirit of creativity and playfulness, and you always have. So as a young teenager, I was playing The Sims, and you were literally like creating games in like you were using, I don't know what you were doing, but you were creating at a level that was far above and beyond as a young early adopter. And I was like, just barely not playing with Barbies anymore. Um, but you have you're such a great example to me of embodying that spirit of playfulness in your personal life as well as your work life. And you have lots of hobbies that don't include more screen time, like you help run a local wood-fired sauna, or you just will have a weekend where you're learning how to make pretzels from scratch. And so you just embody this already. And so I would love to hear a couple of examples of how you have like brought that like I'm interested in this for fun spirit to AI.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you. That's really kind of you to say. I'm glad you see it as, yeah, a spirit of, creativity and playfulness and not undiagnosed ADHD, which it probably is, which is fine too. Um, yeah, I think being playful is a way that I've always learned. So, like you, I was homeschooled, being brought up, and my flavor of homeschooling, how it was done for me, was unschooling, where you don't learn about anything unless you find it interesting, unless you kind of ask your parents to, help you learn more about it. The idea being that, because you're interested in it, you're going to learn faster and you're going to feel a sense of personal agency about the material you're learning. And that makes it fun. That makes it feel like part of you and you're taken more seriously. And it gives you all this wonderful stuff, which makes you very active in your learning process. And that to me feels so obvious. And part of that spirit, that energy that I think has stayed with me has been when I work with different types of technologies and do different types of projects. Because it's fun. It's just inherently a fun thing to, make something strange or to put a bit of your personality somewhere where it wasn't before. So when it came to AI, I've been doing that as part of my own way of learning and kind of just seeing what strange things I can make or how I can use these tools in ways which they weren't really designed to be used for and just see what happens, which I think we all do anyway. I don't think that's something which, is unique to me. I think we all just enjoy, being a bit silly and kind of doing strange things. So that might be, creating a fictional rock band, which I did. It's called Amy in Crisis. You can still go to amyincrisis.com. And I made little music videos and I made the music through AI and I did a whole fake bio of this band. I put graffiti around, like chalk graffiti around the city to try and get people listening to it. And that was a fun little thing. Or a little bit different, I was thinking about there's a tool called Notebook LM that Google's released where it will, generate these human sounding podcasts based on the material that you upload to it. And just out of interest, like last year, as a project, I put together my funeral plan. Not because I'm dying or anything, but I just thought it would be a nice psychological exercise and it would be, a healthy thing to do. So I had this whole plan, I had my eulogy and everything, all the music that I want. And I thought, I wonder what happens if I make a podcast about that. I wonder what that would be like. So I put it on, press make podcast, and it was one of the strangest experiences I've had in my whole time with AI, where I heard this like 15-minute podcast of two strangers talking about me as if I was dead, and then also getting quite a lot wrong too, because they were hallucinating. And it felt like being a ghost that couldn't correct the official record. And it was such an out of body experience. So things like that, are fun, they're memorable to me. And then also it let me know actually where these AIs are failing because I could hear they were hallucinating, they were getting stuff wrong. So by being playful and silly, I was then learning about the capabilities of the tech, and I was then also having conversations with people about it because I was interested
Yeah.
to talk about it more.
Um, I would love to hear the podcast about you. But I think that's a great example that leads me into my next question, which is um, when I use AI, I want it to be like immediately, if I'm like, I'm going to use this tech, I want it to be useful. I want to I try and create art in Midjourney and it looks nothing like it looks in my head. And I'm like, I'm not mastery level proficient in this. How annoying. And, that's not how life works. We're not mastery level proficient in anything. But when AI makes mistakes, I get annoyed and I get exhausted at the idea of like having to learn to do this better. And so that turns into this feeling of like, I might as well just do it myself. Right. And it's like really bumping up against like, that's delegation 101. Like, don't sink into the I might as well just do it myself feeling. So, what would you recommend for us who are getting stuck there with like, oh no, AI has made mistakes and I've spent all this time creating this thing using AI and now it's didn't even do it right? Like, help us there.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of different places you can go with that. I always find for me, AI is much less about making my existing work, reach a higher potential, and it's much more about avoiding stupid mistakes or sort of raising the floor instead of like raising the ceiling, if that makes sense.
Ah, yes.
So a lot of the time, I won't generate much with AI, but I'll have AI look at what I've made and I'll have it kind of critique my own work for, accessibility or redundant language if I'm using it for copy. But a good trick is to break down any task into as many individual component tasks as you can. So, like with copywriting, for instance, which I, for the record, think is one of the weakest applications of AI, but it gets talked about all the time. You can do things like, break that down into proofing, break it down into, reviewing notes from clients, break it down into accessibility for non-English speakers, even break it down into suggesting emojis that you might use when promoting the text, right? Those are all forms of copywriting, but they're all quite different and distinct. So often we'll use the word copywriting when we mean 50 different things. And actually, by testing it out with those individual components of a larger task, you might find some areas that it really does well in, and you can then use it again and again. Emojis, I use it for all the time, by the way. I love it for emojis because I'm not very down with the kids. I don't really know what different emojis are. But so like you'll find random things that way, or you'll find things where you go, oh, I will never use it for this, at least in its current form, right? So you're developing a richer awareness there where you're not just saying, oh, AI is good at copywriting or bad at copywriting. You can start to say, actually, it's really good for accessibility proofing and SEO auditing, but it's really poor when it comes to applying brand guidelines or whatever. You can start to then get that working knowledge. And that will change as new models come out and as you try different things. But it gets you started and it starts giving you some easy wins that way. So that's one way that I would often suggest people kind of get into it is by breaking things down. And then beyond that, give yourself some leeway here as well. Like we're all learning this stuff. The people who create these models are still learning how to optimize them properly. And there are different solutions coming out all the time that can do certain things better, certain things worse. So it's an evolving, messy process. Basically, when you see the result and you know it's working for you, follow your own intuition because the way that you're using an AI tool is going to be much more unique than you think it is because you're using certain types of data, certain types of workflow that other people might not have tested the exact way you're using it. So when you see something with your own eyes that works or doesn't work, trust that and don't think you're using it right or wrong, but allow yourself to develop your own relationship with how to improve the results. But within that, I would also say try lots of different things out because sometimes you can find a program that will actually do the thing you're banging your head against a wall to do when, it's another big model has also come out with it.
Okay. I feel like you said about 100 really, really valuable and important things. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, I'm so glad this is recorded because I'm going to go back and listen to this section every single time I feel frustrated. So thank you. Thank you for that really juicy answer. I don't even have a follow-up question because there was so many different directions I can take that.
That's right.
Um,
Also, what a really good thing to do is actually to watch YouTube on AI. There's loads of YouTubers out there who will do these quick fire videos where they'll try a couple of different tools out. It will be a 12-minute video, have a coffee in the morning. They're quite fun, quite funny, they're quite chatty. If you find a personality you like, that's great. I watch Matt Wolf quite a bit. He's really good at this. And just from that, building that into your routine a little bit, you'll start to see stuff on screen and you'll start to go, oh, you know what? I could hook this tool up to this and I could mix these two together. And that will just kind of keep you in the flow and also keep you aware of like when all your YouTubers at once talk about a new tool that's come out, you get a sense that, okay, this is actually surprising people. So that's also quite a good way of kind of passively continuing your knowledge there.
Yeah, that is something else that I get really stuck on, which is that like we don't know what we don't know. And then not knowing keeps us actually from learning more because we don't know how to do it. And so here was an example of something that I didn't know. And you've already shared another like podcasty example. You were preparing to speak on a panel, I think, with at least another expert. And instead of spending like hours researching this expert's work, reading her papers, her book, I think you did something like uploaded recent papers of hers into an AI tool and then turned it into a podcast that you could just then listen to instead of spending hours reading. So you could familiarize yourself with like her work and perspectives. And then I think you had a conversation with the AI to like iron out some of your thinking before the panel and that discussion with her. And you told me this and I was like, what? What? So, I mean, amazing. How can I think you did answer this already a little bit, but like or a lot of it. How can we begin to see more possible ways of learning about AI so that like the more we know instead of what we don't know, we don't know.
Yeah,
What would
sure.
you recommend?
Sure. I think that's kind of two things there. I think the first one is using AI in a distinctly different way than we use Google, for instance.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the time right now, people haven't quite clocked on that you can, the reason AI is powerful is because it works with the data you give it, not the data it already has. So it has an impressive amount of data. It has, something called the Common Crawl, which is all of the publicly available internet. You can download this file right now, by the way, if you have a big enough computer. So you can use it, for referencing some of that information if you want. And there's a use to that, but it's limited. What's powerful about these models is how it works with the data you give it on your side. That is the big mindset shift there. So, for example, with what you were just saying about that with the academic, so I wasn't just saying to it, can you explain this term to me, and then using it like I would with Google. I was uploading her articles there first, but then also I was uploading articles that I've written and things about my work and things about the projects I'm involved in. And then part of the conversation I was having, this was with a tool called Notebook LM by Google, which is free, was saying, what are some links between the work that we've both been doing? What are some crossovers there? What are some areas that she's researching, which I've also had experience in, and finding that common sort of Venn diagram overlap circles of what are the spaces there where actually we could have some interesting collaborations, right? So that was part of it. It was giving it a lot of data, giving it a lot of context, and then thinking about how can I use sort of the spheres of both of those big bubbles of information to create something useful for me in that moment. Another thing you can do with Notebook LM is upload a whole book to it or two whole books and then say, can you now tell me where both of these books disagree? What are the points where they actually, provide contradictory information? And then use that to find sort of hot areas of debate within a particular subject, right? That's another thing you can do. So I think part of it, the first bit is to actually use it with more data, with more context. And as far as the how do we know what we don't know, great question. I mean, I'm always thinking that. I'm always kind of worried that, oh, there'll be an amazing AI tool out there that I just haven't come across. And here I am doing an all-day workshop. And maybe someone's going to raise their hand and say, why are you giving us these 12 steps? Don't you know that there's something that can do this right away? I'm constantly terrified of that. But also, I try to be very honest about it that, you know, I'm learning all the time too. And this stuff is moving quickly. And part of that is being vulnerable and kind of saying, yeah, we're going to be learning from each other. I'm going to do my best to, be in a whole bunch of WhatsApp groups and to have conversations and to, be on different Discords and try and figure out what I can. But inevitably, you will run into things that you have never seen before. But all I can say is just try and embrace it. There's no real rush for this stuff. As long as you're having conversations, it feels productive, it feels happy, it feels exciting. That's okay. You don't need to know everything all at once. Give yourself some grace. And I think as long as you're having regular conversations about it, the stuff that's useful to you will filter through the same way it did with the internet and the
Yeah.
useful websites filtering through. It will happen if you have conversations about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like reason 533 not to avoid it. um,
If you want to avoid it, you can. Keep them. The world's a busy place, but I think it's there's a lot there to find interesting.
yeah. Earlier, you said something that was very interesting to me, which was something like using AI to raise the floor, not the ceiling, something like that. And so, one of the questions I had for you, which is like, as high level professionals, like, I'm thinking about me, my clients, collaborators, you, these are consultants, coaches, like coaches, marketers, designers, they're like strategically thinking at a really high level. How do we use these tools in integrity in that work that we do? And like, I think I was wondering, is it our responsibility now to use AI to make the ceiling higher? But what you're saying is actually, no, no, don't go up there yet. Like, let's think more base camp. Like, that's a very broad question, but how do we use it in integrity in our work? And how are we raising the floor and not so much thinking about the ceiling?
Sure. I mean, I would say that's just my own conception for my own work is raising the floor. There are
I
certainly
like
people
it.
who are pushing the ceiling with it, and that's really cool. I often start my workshops by saying, what's the worst question that we could be asking right now about AI? And my belief is the worst question we can ask is, you know, how can we do our work faster? Right. I find that such a boring question, and I think it embodies a value of, efficiency for the sake of it, which is kind of heartless and not why we do the jobs that we do. We do it because we want to create great quality. We want to really create things which feel exciting, which feel, um, you know, exceptional in its own way if we can. So I really try and push against the idea of efficiency and much more, like you were saying, how can we do something which really improves value? And then beyond that, how can we do something which we've never been able to do before? So it's not just about doing something faster, it is about hopefully doing something better, but it might, more interestingly, be about doing something which we wouldn't otherwise have known we could do. And again, that's like the internet, isn't it? Like the internet wasn't about saving time or even doing things better. It unlocked a new way of working. It was that whole new paradigm of working. That's why it was exciting. So as far as that, I would say that try and think about the reasons you're using these tools. Are you using them just to do something faster? If so, yeah, you might find some wins there, but you might also gloss over some things and cause yourself some issues. What I would suggest is, you can't make good decisions before you have good conversations, and you can't have good conversations before you have good literacy and good understanding, right? So I think before you're thinking about how can I apply this in my work, a question that might serve you more is how can I learn about this first, and then how can I have good conversations about this, and then you don't have to worry about how to apply it. It will be obvious how to apply it because you'll have those conversations. You'll see things which aren't a gamble. It'll be, well, obviously I'm going to use this because it clearly works. So I would try and step back from how do I apply right now, and instead perhaps ask how can I improve my literacy, and how can I start surrounding myself with conversations which will inevitably get me thinking about this and push me in a direction which is helpful. That's my general idea. And then, yeah, for me personally, I find it helps avoid stupid mistakes more than it makes me feel like I've produced something exceptional. But I think that often an exceptional piece of work is one where you've drilled out a lot of small mistakes. It is one where you have audited it, where you have criticized it, where you have approached it from multiple angles. And AI does help me personally with that quite a lot.
Mm, mm. I love that. I also love how you're saying, like, go out and have conversations about this. And so there's something in our conversation right now that is also working to resolve the tension that I brought up earlier, which was about I don't want more screen time because I perceive using AI as like, hunkering down in a dark room with only the glow of the computer screen, and it's like you haven't eaten in hours. Whereas like you're saying, go out and talk to people, like have interesting conversation. Like that's what we are doing. And this is connection. Sure, we're also on a screen, but that's you're in England. I would love to have this conversation in person. So thanks for also just continuing to say that it's also about person to person.
Completely. Again, just like the internet, you didn't learn about the internet in a basement just on your own. You were talking to your friends about it. You were chatting about it. That's how you were learning. The same is true of AI. It's about what you're seeing your peers use it for, where they're discovering value, and they're probably going to be much more tuned in to, how you might use it too. So they'll be suggesting things that someone
Yeah.
random on the internet wouldn't have suggested. And that process of having peers and using that shared knowledge is going to be lovely. It's going to be fun. It's going to be
Yeah.
interesting and weird and supportive. And that's the stuff which helps us move into a next phase if we choose to. So
Yeah.
I would absolutely try and see building a network in some way around that as a really helpful thing.
Yeah. I love that. Um, Related to the sort of integrity concept, what about AI disclosure? So I think you've answered this to some degree. Like I'm thinking, I'm a writer, so if I use AI and I say, please write a blog post, and then I inevitably go in and edit things and expand on it and make it my own. Or as you're saying, like maybe I've written the blog post and then I go into AI and say, hey, like what have I missed here? Or like, please proof this for me. Um, my question is like, what about disclosure? Like, how can we be thinking about what's ethical and correct there?
Yeah, this is one of the most like common questions that I get, especially in the arts sector. So there's a lot of awareness
Mm,
of not wanting to, pass off things that are AI as being human made, and there's a lot of issues around integrity, a lot of issues around reputation as well. And people talk about, should we say when we've used AI content and all this? And it's a really difficult one for two issues, for sort of two reasons. One, who am I to tell people what to do? It's very sweet that people ask me this, and I'm like, I mean, that's nice, but I don't know. But also, we don't really know what AI content is. If you've ever changed a document because of a green squiggly line on Microsoft Word, you've arguably produced AI content, right? You've changed your work because of an algorithm. We've been doing that since the 90s. But when you send emails that you've edited with Microsoft Word, you don't put in underneath it. By the way, there were green squiggly lines in this that I
yeah, I used spell check, just so you
you
know.
were. This was spell check. And I know it's not exactly the same because generative AI is more powerful, but the general principle is it's very blurry what we count as AI. If you take photos with a Pixel phone, it will automatically adjust the lighting, and it does that with an algorithmic kind of lens. So what you're getting is a piece of AI content. It is something which you can get too philosophical about it and say, do any machines capture anything which isn't artificial? Who knows? These machines are designed with biases in mind to adjust lighting for certain skin tones. They can be quite racist in that way too. So there's lots of these issues with how we produce work with AI and how we produce AI assisted work. So saying this is AI content and this isn't intuitively sounds like we should be able to do it really quickly. We really can't. I've been in a lot of rooms at this point with a lot of people much more intelligent than me who've worked in the arts their whole lives, and we have spent hours on this. And I assure you, there is no quick way to figure this out. Even music, AI music is the big thing
Yeah.
now, or will be very soon. And a lot of that is musicians saying, if I've used an AI to help me with one of the verses, one of the chord structures, is it still my song? Or is this an AI generated song now? Or
Yeah.
where's the line? So, okay, that's the general debate going on. And then transparency. Again, who am I to say? I think do whatever is within your values. I think it's certainly good to err on the side of transparency, personally. That said, I think we're going to get into a situation where, because everyone is declaring that they use some sort of AI tool, it's going to become almost meaningless because
Yeah.
it's, going to become just one section of a website where it says, oh, some of this work might have been created with, and then it'll be a laundry list of AIs. I don't personally see how that helps me. So I think it's a really open question. I think I would suggest people produce things within their integrity, that they have open guidelines, open editorial guidelines about when and why they use AI and what for. Part of the work that I've been doing with the Arts Marketing Association is helping put together a template AI policy that organizations can use and adapt to their own needs to start some of those conversations. But it is very individual, and it comes from literacy in the organization, and then it comes from having sometimes quite challenging conversations about what values do we have, and are there any red lines that we will not cross when it comes to working with AIs. And you can find them, but don't expect someone to find them for you. You're going to have those conversations in your own teams, I think.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that, all of that nuance. It's like we are still just humans reckoning with human questions with the help of machines. Here we are still.
Yeah, no, completely. And I haven't really mentioned it much before, but like there are lots of really strong critical areas with AI which might make you not want to use it. Things like bias that I just mentioned, or
Yeah.
its environmental impact, or its effects on copyright and creative people. So there are lots of really genuine reasons why you might want to formulate those policies or those sort of staff guidelines if you're a larger organization, and hopefully not just a list of don'ts, but also some suggested do's as well. So people can actually feel that they're able to talk about this rather
Yeah.
than secretly using ChatGPT, hoping nobody notices, and then doing, who knows what with company data, right? That's the
Right.
situation you want to avoid, ideally.
Right. Okay, two more questions. For those of us who are ready to go and play with tools right now, you first of all, they should just go follow you on LinkedIn, because maybe once a month, once a quarter, I'm not sure, you put out a leaderboard of like the tools that you find to be particularly great in a whole bunch of different areas. So they should just go follow you and, you know, stay up to date on what you're thinking, which is what I do. But for people who are like, great, give me a tool. You've mentioned Notebook LM, you've mentioned Claude, those are the two that I remember. What are some of your other favorites for just go play?
Yeah, yeah. So Claude, definitely. If you have only used ChatGPT before, try Claude. Talking to ChatGPT, I find a bit like talking to an enthusiastic somebody at a college showing you around who's like really over the top positive, whereas Claude's a little bit more chilled. Will take a position on things and will often give you suggestions that I find a bit wiser. Plus, it just makes you sound kind of cool and hipster. Like, I don't use ChatGPT, I use Claude actually. So that's really good. As far as trying different things out, make some weird stuff, make some music. Try Udio. That's Udio like studio, but just without the S.com. You can make all sorts of different types of music with Udio. You can describe genres, you can write your own lyrics, you can do all of this wonderful, weird stuff. If you want to do some images and kind of play around with that, I would try Ideogram. That's Ideogram. I'll send these as links. That's great. You can also put kind of text in there too. So you can create kind of custom book covers or graffiti or kind of whatever you want to do, which integrates text into it. Then also some of the video generators are getting pretty good now. Not great, I would say, but fun. You can try Sora, that was just released by OpenAI. Luma Labs have something called Dream Machine, which you can use. Kling is a really good one for video. If you're going to try nothing else, just try Kling. You can upload an image that you've made to it and have it animate that image as a video. And that's very, very strong too. So yeah, I would definitely say try out a range of these things. Do try out Notebook LM. That's the one which right now for me pretty much is the leader. That and Claude covers most of my use cases at this point. And then maybe I also then go back to ChatGPT. Things like advanced voice mode on ChatGPT are still state of the art. Generally, how it seems to work is OpenAI will bring out something which will change the game. It will be amazing for about 2 months, and then everyone will bring out something which is a little bit like it or better in certain ways. Then OpenAI won't release anything for another 6 months, and then suddenly they will again, and then everything will go kind of crazy. That's kind of the cycle that we're in. So it's always worth paying attention when OpenAI release something new and something big. But otherwise, yeah, there's a lot of other tools floating around that are really fun to try out. One which I've been using recently as well, just on a side, is called Do Browser. And it's a browser extension where you literally just write in some instructions, like order a pizza and have it sent to this address. And it will actually take control of your browser, click around, and it will do the task for you while kind of saying what it's doing as it does it. And it's the first generation of this tool, so it's a bit rough around the edges. But stuff like that is also really fun to play with.
Amazing. Is that an example of agentic AI?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Full marks. Yeah, agentic AIs are kind of AIs that can do an action for you
Yeah.
in the real world rather than just giving you a bit of text or an image back. So you can have it research something or yeah, order something in that situation. Really fun stuff. And there's a lot of talk that agentic AIs, kind of action taking AIs, are going to be, one of the big things next year and the year after because they're so useful, almost terrifyingly so. And that's definitely an area to watch.
Cool. Um, for people who are listening, who are like, okay, how can we embrace the spirit of curiosity, playfulness, innovation in our organizations? How can people work with you?
That's very kind to ask. Yeah, so I do lots of different types of workshops. I do one-on-ones with executive leaders sometimes, but then I also do online longer sessions. So I do things like a 2 hour session where we look at introduction to AI, learning concepts, conversations, kind of bits of tech that we can break and rearrange and do different things with, and then what kind of conversations come out of that, and then maybe how we can align that with policies within different organizations too. So you can reach me. I have a website. It's aiforculture.com, or you can follow me on LinkedIn. And yeah, I do online sessions all over the world. I love doing that. I did one for a place in Africa a couple of weeks ago. Projects abroad. That was really fun. So it is something that I really enjoy doing, and also I think it's just fun to get different perspectives too. I always say at the beginning of my workshops, you shouldn't just be listening to one person about any of this. You should be getting as many different perspectives as you can. And one of the things I really enjoy doing is trying to finish a workshop where participants in my workshop have their own perspective. They feel like they're able to start talking about it, and
Mm,
they're going to be actually feeding into the learning process of where they work with their colleagues. They're part of that, they're active in that. And that to me is really exciting.
that's so exciting. And that's the feeling I was craving. And you've certainly given that to me today. So I trust that everyone who's listening is feeling a little bit of that as well. So thank you so, so much for being here. I'm so happy. So happy to call you my friend. And I'm so happy you're on the planet with me right now.
The feeling is incredibly mutual, Emily. It's incredibly mutual, and I'm always inspired by the work that you're doing and just the quality and the value that you bring to your clients. And I really appreciate having this conversation. And yeah, I'm always around if anyone listening would like just to have an informal chat about robots and, some of the things they can do.
Oh, thank you. I'll have all your details in the show notes. And thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And to everybody who's here listening, thank you for joining us. And bye for now.
Bye, everyone.